I am so glad that I started this channel when I did. And you should be glad too, because 20 years ago, when I was a sophomore in college, I was insufferable. And there's no need for any sort of reassurance or hedging. Oh, I'm sure you weren't that bad. No, I was insufferable because I was like the archetypical liberal arts student who read, 6 books. I read Genealogy of Morals, Second Treatise on Government, Fear and Trembling, uh, and Rousseau, Locke, Kierkegaard, 6 books, and then suddenly I'm like drinking wine. I don't even like wine, and I'm saying everyone's everybody, this whole thing's a lie. All these people, it's all about money. I mean, like, yeah, maybe, but also shut up, And it's like I was just saying lines from Thus Spoke Zarathustra and acting like I'd come. Yeah, you read the same 6 books as everybody else on campus, but you, Malone, you see the world for exactly what it is, and you don't got to play by the rules anymore. And the greatest example of this, and this is one of those things that when I think about it, I actively feel a cringe reaction, and I am starting to feel it now. So I'm just going to lean into it. So I remember we were reading somebody named Northrop Frye, and Northrop Frye is actually really cool. We're going to talk about Northrop Frye today, and we're going to talk about story creation and about solo gaming and how the story that we want to create is probably the most important part on uh, creating the gaming experience that we want. Okay, so we gotta crawl through this mile of crap first, because we were reading Fry, and he was talking about cyclical mythical roles. All right, so Fry is known for something else that we're going to talk about in the video, but this other thing was these cyclical mythic roles, where basically the 4 mythoi. How slappable, face slappable is that? Where someone's like, "Oh, you're referring to the mythoi, the plural of mythos, already a word you don't need to say, and now you're pluralizing it." Yes. So the 4 mythoi of comedy, tragedy, romance, irony. Right. This goes back to the very beginning of sort of like the development of the stage, the play, and dramatics in Greece, right? And I mean, it still holds. That's pretty much the 4 base genres: comedy, tragedy, romance, irony. And so we were part of like a group that we wanted to, what do you call it, rewrite the rules. And so we came up with a social experiment in which we were going to subvert the paradigm of a stand-up comedy show. No, we were going to do a different mythoi. We were going to do a stand-up tragedy show. Oh, oh, sorry. It's just like when people are like, "Would you go back in time and live, such and such decade again?" I'm like, only if I can go back as me and meet my 20-year-old self and give him a scoff to the Facha de Brute. Because okay, we were like, we're going to do a stand up tragedy show. And this is well before Nanat, okay? So we're like, we're going to get people to go up to the front and tell really sad stories. And the people in the audience, they're going to cry their eyes out. And you know what? They might not like it at first, but at the end of the show, and we know this for sure because we're 20 and we've read Sartre, they're gonna realize that crying is just as valuable as laughing, and that we seek out crying. Do we not listen to sad songs when we're sad? Do we not like to see a sad movie because it teaches us the weight of things? Through sadness, do we not find catharsis? Don't we sometimes just need a good cry? So we're going to have this show, and people are, even if they don't like it, they're going to be trapped because they're so enraptured by the performances we give. And I specifically remember talking about this. We're like, what's great about this is that if you do stand-up comedy, you suck if people aren't laughing. And so like if you're bombing. But for us, we don't, like, if they're not crying, that doesn't mean they're not sad or not enjoying it. So even if they don't react, like, we don't have to have the feeling that we're bombing on stage. My friends, we had that feeling. The show was supposed to be an hour and a half. I think we mercy killed it at 37 minutes. Um, I remember in between two of the acts, some guy in the audience just said, "Why are you doing this?" He's like, "Why are you doing this?" And I remember being like, "That's exactly the right question." And in my head, I was like, "Why are we doing this?" So interestingly, I think we did subvert the paradigm in that we made like a stand-up irony show, in that you do a show to perform and have people enjoy it. And I think that instead we did a show that people hated. Um, and, I mean, people generally do not do an emotion that you want them to do, right? That's why your cousin Andy that keeps telling you how funny this story is during the story. That's why you're always so glad his funny story's over, because they suck, right? Because being constantly reminded of the correct emotion feels manipulative. And sometimes looking back at movies, if you notice, it's just like a very well placed violin. And then you could like watch the scene on mute and you're like, wait a minute, that scene wasn't even powerful. I just thought it was because Hans Zimmer's in the back. And so people don't like being misled emotionally. They also don't like being led, right? I mean, there's a certain obstinacy when we're told to feel a certain way. The only reason comedy works is because you're able to do a bait and switch that has an instantaneous reward. If you think about the structure of most jokes are uncomfortable. There is a stringing of tension, rising tension. The situation was bad. Will you believe it? Uh, I had my job interview, and right before it, I crapped my pants. What am I going to do? Oh no. I was driving and the steering wheel came off. These are all stories that if they end there, they're horrible. But there's something that switches at the end. And the joy, the euphoria of that release of tension is so big that you just erupt, right? And if you look, I mean, I think I mentioned this before, and somebody in the comments gave like a sound reaction to this. So this might not be the case, but the analogy stands. There was some like theory about laughter, that it was a primate's way of showing aggression and then releasing it. That's why like you show your teeth and then open your mouth. So to say like, I'm mad at you. You did something, but like I enjoyed it, so I'm letting you off the hook. I'm not going to chomp you with my teeth. All right. So the point is, two ways. Number one, we don't like and usually do not conform to the emotional expectations given to us. Um, I could have tried that with, and I think we probably did. If comedy gives you a tense situation and rewards you with a funny twist of fate, well, how about we tell a happy story? And then at the end, we say, and yeah, we all stood together for the family picture, mom, dad, me, and Bobo. And then that was the last time I ever saw Bobo. Like, that doesn't feel good. You're not rewarding them with any feeling. They're feeling worse, right? That's like if comedy is taking off a tight tie that you've been wearing all day, that would be like putting a tie around you, rubbing it up and down on the back of your neck for too long, and then at the end just kind of like that, right? And so um, this is a problem though, in terms of how do we go about getting or giving an emotional experience that we want to get or give when we really don't have good success with that when we know it's coming. Okay. To an extent. I mean, obviously, there are situations where this differs, but for the most part, we, I think, especially men, are going to have an obstinance to a feeling. There's a voicemail that I got recently that is not quite lined up with this episode, so I'll play it at a later one, but it's about how to create horror. And this is a problem with horror. When you go to a haunted house as a kid, you're steeling yourself before you go in because you don't want to give into that fear, even though giving into it would be more fun, etc. This is extremely important in solo gaming. And that's why this video is going to explore this idea of the creation of emotionality. How do we do it? How can we do it? How can we do it through solo play? And why that's important for solo play. Because really, this video is an answer to a question that should be the title. I hope I remember to make it the title. And that is, what are we after? Like, what are we after in solo play? In group play, there's lots of things we could be after. We're after some socialization. We're after performing in front of others. We're after progressing our characters and having that be socially recognized. Hell, we're after it because we want to. There's a cool dude in the group. We want to be best friends. We're after it because we like the pizza, because we like the system, because we really want to try out these new dice, because we want to start GMing for the first time, because it's just fun to laugh together and to make decisions, whatever. But in solo play, we lose a lot of that. And this is not an accusation. Because I certainly would be pointing the finger at myself first. It's not an accusation, but like I think sometimes we lose the thread of like why we like solo gaming, what kind of experiences we like, because I will sometimes get a sense, even in my own videos, and watching others, of like much ado about nothing, where we're fretting over details and systems and mechanics and what is in the book and what's missing from the book and what should be there and what should have more room and what shouldn't have taken up. And really, it's like, but why? What are we after? What are we after that this book, this game is preventing us from getting? I think articulating that is extremely important. And I want to start with a case in point right here, which is a book I've been sitting on for so long, trying to make a video on it. And I've played it. It's not bad. It is, if you know anything about this art and about the title here, the amnesiac detective RPG called Jamais Vu. It even says it in the book. This is a this game is an unofficial tabletop adaptation of the video game Disco Elysium by I think it still is from Zaum. They fired all their writers and there'll never be another Disco Elysium. Anyways, um, I don't know if they fired all their writers. I know that they fired Robert Kurvitz. Yeah. Anyways, so the game does a pretty good job of capturing Disco Elysium. Now, if you've never played Disco Elysium, um, beware. That is not what you commonly hear when people talk about Disco Elysium. But here's why you need to beware, because the way that people talk about it, some people can develop an expectation that it is one of the greatest games ever made, and I believe that it is. I just want to say that I believe that it is. Um, Not only is the game beautiful, it is also fun. It is also extremely memorable. It has amazing music, amazing graphics, amazing characters. It is enlightening. It makes me think every time I play it in new ways and truly makes me think about things. Um, but it is not everyone's type of game. It is an RPG in which you play a drunk amnesic detective who, along with his partner, are trying to investigate a murder. and you're in this town, and it's an entire world is made, and it's this is just incredible, like the level of lore um, of this world is you're in a place called Martinez, and it's in a world where they're in this like revolutionary hangover. There was some big event that everyone thought was going to bring in the utopia, and it didn't bring about a dystopia. It just brought like nothing. And there's this force called the Pale that surrounds Martinez, and it's just like nihilism. And at the same time, you're having these conversations, and rather than like leveling up your stamina or your aim, you're leveling up like your ability to um, perform deductive reasoning, or to feel the vibes of a city, or to you can get a necktie that talks to you. um Anyways, it's an incredible experience, but there's no, or I guess next to no combat. I really mean that, like right next to no combat. Maybe you have one thing or two. um there is a lot of reading, like 1,000 pages of reading if you broke it into a book. um it is uh sometimes you really don't know what to do next, you know? And so, anyways, it's not for everyone, but if you're the type of person that can appreciate CRPGs and that sort of experience, even if you're a person who's like maybe like you like Pathfinder, Kingmaker, Pillars of the Earth, or Eternity or whatever, and like you can get that much of a foot in, I really encourage you to invest in Disco Elysium and to play it. um, Give it your best shot. Like read everything on screen just like an hour and see if you can stand it. But if not, that's the only reason is like some people will get it and they'll say, "I thought you said this was the best game ever." I literally walk around and use methamphetamine or something. And so um, when I saw the game itself is like an RPG, right? It's tons of choices, and there is I forget what the word is in. It's such a good word. Actually, I need to sit and think about it for a second so that I say it. I want to say connectivity. Okay, it's. You ever have that thing where you're like looking for something, and then you find it, and you're like, oh, I didn't think it was that, but I guess it's reactivity, and it basically is a measure in CRPGs of like how much does the game change based on the choices you make. And so a game with very high reactivity might have something that like in the first 10 minutes you'll choose a ham sandwich instead of a turkey, and then you'll be at the final boss and they'll be like, "Well, luckily you've never eaten ham, because people that have eaten ham in the last 48 hours, they're able to beat me with ham breath." Do not steal that idea. I said it first and I'll remember. Okay. So, anyways, um, this is a game with a high level of reactivity, in such that there is this network of choices that you make in the game, and they do have consequences. Sometimes the consequences are more, I don't know if cosmetics the right word. They might change one thing, but not everything has this like domino effect that leads to alternatives. But there is a significant amount of reactivity in this game, such that like I have never had the same playthrough. I've played it 3 or 4 times, and it is because of that reactivity, it makes up a lot of ground for the one thing as of right now that like console or computer games don't have against in-person games, which is like infinite potential. Right? I was playing Pendragon earlier tonight, and it was the sword in the stone thing, and everybody starts like running over because a young boy just pulled the sword from the stone in front of, what was it, Saint Mark's or whatever, I don't remember. But um and I was like, how funny would it be if I just like took out my bow and arrow and was just like doink, and just like killed King Arthur, you know, in the next entire like 150 years was just the anarchy period. You can't do that in a game, a computer game or a console game, because you have to choose the choices that are available. And to be honest, if they ever try to start like slipping AI into the game to do that, it still won't be possible, because I mean, if you think about it, you're not just changing the future dialogue, you're also having to change like the graphics, who is involved, what actually happens, how you represent that on screen. So I can't say it'll never happen. In fact, I should probably take it back given how things are going. It won't happen this week. Um, but in terms of just mechanically um, representing uh, Disco Elysium in book form, I think this is a valiant effort to do so. Specifically, because one of the main mechanics in the game is these sort of internal monologuing with yourself. Each like stat, well, not every single one, but many of the stats will exist as sort of their own entities or complexes within you, and they will interject and make you represent your impulses, your regrets, your compulsions, all of these things. And so sometimes you're doing skill checks to react, resist, or conform to these different interjections that come up. And so they actually were able to make a pretty good, like, as good as possible system of this. I didn't like one thing where it got kind of mixed up in the sort of I don't even know what they call it, but like at the beginning of these games where you say, I don't want to talk about this. I want to, and they sort of, I think, tried to weave that into it to say like, oh, in this next scene, I want to do this or have my character do this. And that approaches something brilliant that I'll talk about, but it doesn't quite land. And then you have the bigger issue, as always, in mystery games, where um, even though, again, I think they do as good of a job as you can, but ultimately in mysteries, uh, clues are more, it's solving a mystery in almost all tabletop role playing games involves a scavenger hunt in which you have abstract clues. And when you have enough clues, you can then like take a shot to solve the mystery. A good, and I've actually done a video on this before, but a good effort will try to give texture to those clues and will make them, you know, have abstract words or phrases that, you know, you can combine together to actually summon a meaningful ending. But ultimately, it doesn't quite feel the same way as a good mystery game or movie, where it is not your ability to collect things, or your, you know, it might be your persistence, but it's not a scavenger hunt. It's a an alchemy of thoughts, oblique thinking, looking at things from a different frame, finding out that things that are right in front of you were the answer all along, but you know, you have such trained expectations that you weren't able to see it. That sort of pleasure of surprise discovery, it's hard to put that into a book. But even so, I think this was a pretty good effort, but I don't want to play it. Or at least I'm not super enthused about playing it again. And this has really made me look within, because I love Disco Elysium. It's as good an attempt as any in it, right? And why don't I want to do it? Well, the answer to that is the nature of the inquiry of this video, which is like, what are we after? What am I after in Disco Elysium that Jamais Vu isn't, what do you see in her? No, it's like, what is it in this that I don't get that I get in the video game? Is it some sort of composite gestalt, some greater than sum of parts thing? I don't think so. But why is it that you can sort of take all the pieces of it and build it again over here, but it doesn't feel like my house anymore? You take all the bricks in my house, move them over here, build them, good as possible. What is it? And what is it that I'm after in the experience of playing Disco Elysium that I can't be after here, that I can't be pursuing? I think the answer to that is not does not have anything to do with mechanics. I don't think it has anything to do, or I should say, does not primarily have to do with the usual suspects of writing, mechanics. It has to do with the feeling that it creates. And creating a feeling is it's a little more tricky, right? Because you can say that you want to create a mystery game, and there are some good templates for how that might happen. But why do you want to play a mystery game? What is it about a mystery that gets you going? And so if you were to say, I want to be vexed and then pleasantly surprised when all of these disparate clues and insinuations come together and reveal, the truth. I want to have that frustration of not knowing. I want to have the catharsis of figuring it out. I want to one of the things that's fun in like movies that are good with twists and stuff is running the movie back in your head and seeing how all of those scenes are changed now that you know that person had a completely different frame, right? Those things, they are questions of mechanics in a way, but it's bigger than that. Okay. And so what I want to do in this video is try my best to reverse engineer the feelings that that I am after in things, and then see if we can create some sort of template for laying out what sort of experience you want to have. And my hope is that by getting more in touch with, or at least better articulating that feeling that you're after, you're going to be more likely to play because you know what you stand to win, right? Because if you really think about it, the things that people will groan about all the time, oh, I don't like the 2D20 system. I prefer to use the year zero system. And I can create some ideas about why that is. And I think there are some tactile reasons, some field of vision reasons, and dopamine pathways and stuff like that. But ultimately, I am after something that system gets in the way of me getting, or does not provide a road for me to get to it. But I don't know what it is. It certainly isn't 2D20, right? That cannot be what we're after. That is like a lower order of thought, right? That's like going to see an action movie and saying, well, the reason I want to see this movie is because there's going to be missiles. I mean, yeah, missiles they rule. Like if you were a child of the 80s, there better be a missile in your movie, and hopefully Arnold is like firing it from his arm himself. But like, it can't be that, because just showing you a picture of a missile or throwing it across the room is not going to do whatever it is that thing does in the end of Commando when he says, let off some steam, Benedict, or whatever. It's a feeling, okay? And so I am going to just really briefly talk about what Northrop, that's going to be an ongoing issue here, what Northrop Frye talks about. And then I'm going to use an example of a few movies that I really love. And I'm going to try to reverse engineer them. I'm going to try to do it with one movie in particular. And I encourage you to think about a movie, a book, a TV show, a play. You could do a song. A song actually might be really interesting. It's just harder to disassemble a song because it's a smaller sample, right? And so, one of the things that I'm going to engage in, and that is an absolute must to derive any sort of benefit off of this, is I'm going to be very honest, okay? Because for those of us who like film is an important part of our life, it's very hard to talk about it without it becoming like a little bit egoic, right? Because film is an investment. It is, I am able to sit in a theater that's freezing. What's up with so many theaters being freezing? And I'm able to see someone else's vision, and I'm able to interpret it, and I'm able to see, compare it. And I form these opinions, and these opinions are quite elevated. I could be sitting here doing, Howard Bloom type criticism. Wait, was Howard Bloom the one who did Bloom's text? Anyways, the point is that I'm going to talk about movies I love, and not all of them are like known as great movies. But I do this, I prostrate my movie likings as a means to show you the sort of insight that can be gleaned when we are real about ourselves. Because, it's okay. If we didn't pretend to like stuff until we liked it, sometimes there's all sorts of foods and experiences that we would never get to because there's a way to enjoy things beyond the immediate sensory experience of it. But there's something about these movies that is really special to me. Okay, really quick, I want to talk about Northrop Frye. All right, so Frye is a Canadian, I don't know, literary theorist. And he was an English professor. And his most famous work in the 50s was called Anatomy of Criticism. And basically, and you could probably see once I start talking about why this is, how I got to Northrop Frye, but he tried to create a construct to categorize movies or books, actually, sorry, based on archetypal patterns like Jung. So he drew really heavily from like mythology, religion, classic literature, etc. And much like Jung, with complexes and behaviors and subconscious dreams, all that, Frye extended that over and felt that literature functions as this universal mythic structure. Not and so it was a structuralist theory. And what that means is he sees literature as a system, a conversation, a web of things, not just isolated works one on one, is that each book sort of like fit into the big Lego mountain here. And all of this was to the purpose of revealing what, and I really like this phrase, is revealing deep grammar, right? Deep grammar, the underlying scaffold architecture of meaning, this sort of more than primitive. It is, stamped onto our the thumbprint of our soul, the DNA of who we are, is this sort of template for meaning from which like mythology tries to speak to it in the best way it can. And we see these things everywhere. That's why we look up at the sky and look at a freaking kite of like 4 stars and we're like, dude, that's Big Dipper. That's a huge bear. And then another person's like, yeah, okay. It's like, well, okay, over there's a squid. And he's like, shut up, it's not a squid. Anyways, so his major idea, aside from the mythoi, is that a protagonist, and this should sound familiar to RPG players, protagonists have power levels. And that could mean like how physically strong they are. It could also mean how spiritually strong they are. It basically meant like the moral position of the main character compared to everybody else. And that mostly it was very obvious what level the character is because the reader reacts to each type of these. There's 5 types. Each of them he reacts to in a different way. And even though we don't name them and we don't consciously see it this way, and I did write it out, but I think it'll be like a little bit difficult to see. Can I zoom, and a zoom? Let's see. Okay, that works. So the first is mythic, and he called these modes. So technically, it's mythic mode, and pretty cool, right? Mythic, very solo RPG relevant. And mythic was like the divine hero. And the way that this is defined is that mythic heroes are greater than other humans and greater than the natural world. The only thing that is not greater than a mythic mode character would be another mythic mode character. So, and often they were equal. So, like Zeus, Gilgamesh, okay? And narratively, these stories feel. I'm going to go with my gut here because I think this is the right word. Operatic. They feel mythological. They feel timeless. They feel metaphysical. Now, we have the divine hero for mythic. For romantic, this is like a superhuman. So if the divine hero was stronger than humans and stronger than nature, the romantic hero is greater than other humans, but not greater than nature. And that doesn't necessarily mean like rain and mountains and stuff. It could, but it means like this is a person who is not able to transcend natural law. They can't like actually like Marvel Comics used to have a really cool system of this until it got a bit complicated, but there was like omega level mutants. They were the highest level and they could really like alter reality or create whole worlds. Whereas superhuman, that would be like Superman, right? It would be like you are super strong, stronger than everyone else. And despite the stupidest scene in all of Superman history where he uses his power wind breath to turn the earth backwards and reverse time so that Lois doesn't fall in the river. Despite that little blip, he can't like Superman can't change the laws of physics other than for his own body. He can't suddenly make like a house go to the moon or whatever. So this would be like King Arthur, Odysseus, most superheroes that have like superpowers, and they're very often tragic champions. Like it is their perfection that separates them, and they have a vulnerability. They have to have a vulnerability, and part of their vulnerability or part of their tragedy of them is that like their vulnerability becomes invisible because they have so many less vulnerabilities than other people. All right. We have high mimetic. This would be the noble human hero. So this is like equal to other humans, but you're above average. You're like Captain America, Wolverine, right? You're at the what do they always say? The peak of physical conditioning, right? So this might be like Wolverine, Macbeth. Um, I mean, I'm thinking about Shakespeare, like Hamlet. Yep. Othello. Yep. James Bond, high mimetic. mode. Like James Bond can't fly, but he can do a lot of stuff. And very often these characters are in social moral dramas. Uh, the stakes might be global, political, but they're also personal. Okay, so like, and I mean this happens on other levels as well, but they're personal in a relatable way to the viewer. It's not like, oh, I've got to get back to Krypton. You know, is my species still alive that I was evacuated from in a ship by Russell Crowe? Then we have low mimetic, and this is ordinary human. Um, so I don't know, Jane Eyre, Holden Caulfield, everyone on The Office. It's just equal, no special power, no status. And this is like slice of life, realist, relatable, flawed, small scale. A lot of times in RPGs, this is kind of the wanderer, you know, the survivor, the everyman. And then we have ironic mode, and I know that some of you like ironic mode, and this is less than average. They're delusional. They're undercut by circumstance. This would be like an Ignatius from Confederacy of Dunces. Why can't I think of Ignatius's last name? Doesn't matter, because it's being crowded out by a Warhammer character who I think his name is Ignatius Grugor. Oh, I've got to find Ignatius's last name. Of course, Ignatius Riley or Ignatius J. Riley. So these are less than average, delusional, or really screwed. A great one is Gregor Samsa, Don Quixote. I don't know if he has a name, but the narrator from Notes from the Underground. And these characters are usually absurd, comical, tragicomic, existential. And they're used as a sort of, like, they are as unbelievable as the superhumans, just on how bad they have it. You know, like, and even worse if they don't realize it or they think they have it all. All right. This is important in what we're trying to do here, because I think that a very strong starting point for determining what we're after, what we want to get out of solo play, is positioning ourselves in relation to how much power we want to have. It doesn't have to be static. In fact, some people, they like starting low and going higher and higher. Scarlet Heroes, for example, would probably be like right here, and maybe even get your character here. I don't know if anyone would play it to here, but Microscope is a good game of like playing it at that macro level. I don't even know if you could say that that's a character though, but very often we're going to play characters here, and there has to be an unusual setup to play mythic or ironic in a tabletop game. I'm trying to think of what an ironic character in TTRPG would look like. It would probably not be a very sustainable character, but I'm trying to think of some like goofy, and I don't necessarily, I'm not saying it's bad, but just like an offbeat type of let me do a think on this for a second. You know, you might say that like the player characters in Merc Borg, right? You're just like fighting over a, you know, a leg bone that doesn't even have any meat on it, and you're 3 days away from the apocalypse. Yeah, that feels right. But yeah, I mean, in a way, that sort of gives me some insight, because and I know it does happen, but like, do you know a lot of long-term Merc board campaigns? Do you know a lot of people that have been playing the same campaign for 7 years? Some of that's mechanical, right? I mean, you have what, like 3 HP, and sometimes your character dies when you're rolling them up and stuff, but it's also because you're too weird to live. You know, it's the Hunter S. Thompson thing. It's like a like something like that cannot keep living unless it changes. And sometimes we see this with like people that are famous for one reason or another. I think it's probably why like the 33 Club exists for musicians, because like if you live that far outside of the brackets, you either have to conform in some way or you have to keep getting weirder and weirder until you're a danger to yourself. I mean, it doesn't seem like it now. And in fact, I was like sort of thinking about Eminem, like what he was when he came out. And now listening back to those songs, which are, still very skillful and stuff, but the things that we reacted to as if they were thrilling or like if Eminem came out with a song like that now, people would be like, dude, we don't want to hear about this stuff. Like, this isn't cool or funny. Um, it would be like if a 35-year-old person suddenly was like, I'm going to start doing graffiti. It's like, why? Why are you going to do that? You're 35, right? That's not what a 35-year-old should be working on right now. I mean, unless it's, you know what I mean. All right. So, and now additionally, though, because Frye is mostly known for this, I really think that the Mythoi are important too. And I especially like, and I think this gives us some guidance here, the Mythoi, he divided them by season. And so he said that comedy was spring, that romance was summer. What is autumn? Tragedy. Um, and that winter, and this is the only one that I like, I sometimes feel it, and then sometimes I'm like, which is irony or satire. Um, and maybe that's like if you grew up in the Midwest like me, sometimes you're like, why did anyone settle here? Well, just keep going. Why couldn't my forefathers have kept going to like Orlando? Um, anyways, so these, in addition to conforming them to these seasons, um, they had with them the archetypical roles that went along with that. So it sort of united the theories. Like the spring was the revenant, the reborn, the trickster. Summer, the lover, the Don Juan, the hero, the quest giver. Autumn, the noble sufferer, the martyr, the king without a crown. And then winter, maybe that's like the ghost or the presumed dead. I don't know. I have to think about that one a little bit more. Maybe I can go back to the primary source. But yeah, like spring is, if you think about what the processes are, it's chaos. It emerges from chaos and goes towards harmony. Um, it is something that has a tough trajectory. It has a tough start, but its trajectory is toward uh, harmony, union, rebirth. Summer is like there's a triumph of life, right? Like, yeah, you buried me under snow for 4 months, but I'm back, baby, and I'm better than ever. And a fulfillment of the ideals, the you know, harvesting, plant sowing and harvesting, and you have in summer this like everything we worked for is growing now. Uh, Autumn could be like the rise that precedes the fall, I guess, a bit ironically. Rise to fall is fall. And maybe an aging, which could be graceful, right? And I think it tracks pretty well to, at least for me personally, how some years I really hate autumn. It feels like a Sunday scary when you know you have work on Monday morning and you're like, I know winter's coming. And then sometimes it's like you feel you're coming into your own and that you feel like you have more ownership over the seasons of your life. Um, Winter, this is where I do see winter, is this sort of like hollowness, but just unrelenting and even sort of ill advised persistence or endurance. All right. So this is where I start to understand some of the work that can be done here. Is that we have these character modes. We are able to say, is my character above, equal to, beneath people in the world? And that is power calibration. And then there's seasonal arcs, is a simple way to say, is your story about rebirth, glory, downfall? Is it absurd? And then you can also look at these archetypical roles attached to that and say, is this who my character is? But, and if you're clever, you probably already are thinking about this, just because you like a character's archetype doesn't mean that you want to play that character. The court jester is very important in Shakespeare. Does that mean that you want to be the jester? Well, in a way, tabletop role playing has a nice solution for that, is that you have a whole group of people. And so you could play these different facets. But in solo mode, unless it's designed to have more player characters, and even then, how often are we really able to embody 4 characters that we're running simultaneously? We want to figure this out. How do you do it? Well, again, I think the question is not what game should I play, what genre should I play, what system should I use. The only question that should matter is, what are you after? What feeling state do you want? And yes, I understand there's probably more than one feeling state. You're going to laugh in a campaign, you're going to cry, friends become enemies, enemies become friends, etc. But what do you want? I mean, this is one of the most fundamental feelings, or when you decide what movie to go see, as if anyone goes see movies anymore, you do think about this, right? Yeah, sometimes it's like hype, but sometimes you're like, I don't really want to see a sad movie right now. Or like, for me, I, this is very surprising to a lot of people, but everyone knows this. We can confirm with Mr. 55. I hate comedies. I hate them. I have no patience for them. They seem so frivolous to me. I hate them. And why? Well, you could say that I'm a miserable misanthrope, or I really don't have a need to infuse that sort of energy into my life. If anything, I have too much of that, an abundance of it, right? And so I need things that are able to level those sorts of feelings out. All right, so I promised that I would do a dissection of a movie that I really enjoy. And a movie, there was a lot of, it took me a bit to figure out which I want to do, because the probably the one that came to mind first, I don't know if I'll say it's my favorite movie, but I will say that it did come to mind first and strongly, but I can't do it because it's such a disassembly, it's a deconstruction. It's, if you've ever seen Synecdoche, New York, but that movie, I can't, that's a movie and a movie and a entire New York City inside of a New York, anyways. The movie that I want to talk about, and I don't know how many of you have seen this or even heard of it, but it's a movie that came on the tail of another very, very famous movie by both this actor and the director. It was after Pan's Labyrinth and after No Country for Old Men, and it's called Biutiful. And it takes place in Spain. And so I think it's supposed to be a sort of like Spanish accented Spanglish, sort of beautiful. All right. And it has Javier Bardem. Yeah, I definitely confused Guillermo del Toro for Inarritu. Two great directors. But Inarritu, I think right before, well, prior to Biutiful, he did Babel, 21 Grams, amazing movie. One of his best, actually, the one where, see, I'm being like an egoic film person. Amores Perros is a very good movie, although I don't know if I can say that on YouTube, because isn't that a really bad, okay. He also did The Revenant, with Leo DiCaprio, where he fights a bear. And Biutiful is, I did all this thing to bring up a picture and then I didn't bring up a picture. All right, so, and I also want to say, only because this is probably one of my most listened to soundtrack creators of all time. This is scored by, I think you say his name, Gustavo Santoayo, Santoaya. Um, and between him, Amos Roddy, Philip Glass, I'm a big soundtrack listener. Soundtrack listeners, shouts out in the comments. But yeah, basically, this movie is a very beautiful movie. There's a very short song on the soundtrack that I suggest you listen to. It's called Black Butterflies, and it's spelled like this. It's a very powerful movie. It's very layered. It also, at times, its reach exceeds its grasp. You can't even see that. Black Butterflies. There's like a subplot in it that doesn't fully mesh with it. That's a bit supernatural. But I think overall it does service something in the film and it comes together and it is just tragic. But his character in this, his character's name is Uxbal. Okay. Uxbal. And he plays this character who is a father with two children in Barcelona. And everyone, his wife has bipolar disorder and is an alcoholic. His brother is not a good guy. He is involved in like getting jobs for Haitian refugees, I think, in Barcelona. But so there's part of it like the refugees all know to go to him to find a job, but the job, like, it's not great jobs, but he does care. It's very morally complex. The point is that everybody in this movie needs him. They need him, and he has something going on that nobody knows about, and he just won't say it. And the whole movie is shot so close to Bardem's face, and Javier Bardem already has, his head must be 6 feet tall, 6 feet wide, but there's just this fatigue. He's just sweating. He's so beaten down by everything. Everyone needs him. Everyone wants a piece of him. Nobody sees him. And partially that is created by him because he's the guy. He's the guy you go to. His kids, the immigrant workers, everybody needs him, and he is suffering, and nobody can see that. But even so, he's not resentful. There is no point where he's like, why can't, maybe to his brother, but I feel like that's a very appropriate dynamic, having a brother. But it's like he just keeps moving. He carries the pain like it's his job. No complaint, no grand gestures, just enduring it because he loves everyone that he takes care of. He loves them and he has responsibility. And this, I realize, is, to me, like my Byronic hero. I admire him, and I see the highest version of myself in that. That sort of stoic carrying that today, I would say there's a lot of social advice to, like, let it out, tell your story, cry, lean on people, be vulnerable. And in a lot of ways, that's great. But also, if everybody is vulnerable and we all lean on each other, I'm not certain that it will form, like, a self-supporting circle. Like sometimes it's just hard and we have to keep going and we have to be stronger than our weakness. Um, I respect quiet dignity of suffering without spectacle. Um, he doesn't need recognition and he doesn't get it. He perseveres without validation. Um, and he is like, even when he's got nothing left, he'll still stand between like the threats and those that he loves. There's integrity there, sacrifice. And I know the coaching that comes for this now. Believe me, I know the coaching for this where it's like, yeah, but is that realistic? How long could he sustain? He can't. So what? You know, I don't know if we need to do therapy on every character in every movie. If something inspires us, if something moves us, that is so rare that we don't need to disassemble it all the time. We can just say, I am moved by this. Now I start to know a feeling that I like. I'm not saying every feeling or every sort of experience of engaging with a creative work is like the experience I want all the time, but it's one of them that I want. So much so that movies that show me Uxball in different scenarios, God, I'm such a Midwesterner, Uxball, who show me this character through different faces. These move me. There is some frozen pieces of me that thaw a bit and sometimes even shift. That's powerful. That means something, right? But that's not the only one. So I think about some other movies that I want. But the thing right now is like, how can we embody that as we solo role play? How can we be someone who doesn't have to win, who just has to keep going? We don't necessarily need to be that character at the beginning. Sometimes the archetype is at the beginning, and sometimes it's what we work towards. And if we are able to locate the proper destination of our character, remember the quote, like, if you know why, you can suffer through almost any how. People asking all the time, how do I stick with it? How do I maintain it? Well, here's the thing. Do you want the feeling that you're headed towards? Do you know the feeling? And yeah, we don't know. We don't know. Like, right, if we do this right, it's a total surprise. It's a total mystery. Fine. But do you even know? Do you even know what will reward you? Because there are certain stories to me that do not reward me. Like, there are certain movies that I watch and I stand up and I'm a big jerk when it comes to movies. I ruin everyone's mood, but I'll be like, yeah, that character was an idiot. Like everything that just happened for the last hour and 48 minutes didn't need to happen. They're a moron, right? And yes, that's a bit short-sighted and stuff, but I'm just saying that, like, I'm not always moved by every character. I think that's self-evident, okay? Now, once we know what we want, though, that not only gives us identity, it starts to give us theme, tone, mechanics. So theme, quiet survival, moral fatigue, invisible love. The tone, melancholy, human scale drama. Mechanics, that is literally where the rubber hits the road. Is there scarcity here? Is there pain that must be journaled or not? Maybe you can't journal it. It needs to just be endured. We don't have time to journal. Maybe we're not getting victories in this game. Maybe we have to choose how to lose so that somebody else is safe. So when I say, for instance, I want a grim solo journaling game, what I'm really saying is I want a space where I can be someone who carries pain without praise and is still able to give love. This is the kind of powerful values-based translation that we're after here. Here are some other ones. Adaptation. And I had to put at least one Charlie Kaufman movie in there. 2002. One of the greatest performances of one of the greatest actors of all time, Nicolas Cage. This one is, what's the key emotion? Recognition of how self-deception blocks your growth. Core value? Humility through failure. Maybe I should write a little book on this. So we have the key emotion, the core value, player identity. So we have key emotion as the staggering, sobering moment of recognition and how lying to yourself has stopped you from growing. The core value of the movie is that failure might teach us to have the humility we need to not fail anymore. Player is self-aware or self-obsessive, overthinking, but is obsessed with truth even though they really don't even know why, or they can't tell the difference between truth and just their own need to like feel like they are the only one who sees it. Do you know why I identify with that character? Do you identify with that character? Yeah. This is where we start getting to the core of something special that we are able to do through this very simple thing. Heroism. Is there heroism in adaptation? A movie about making a book into a movie that is a real book and a real movie, but the movie in the movie is the movie being made, and it's not real except it is real because it's being made as the movie is being made. Transformation through surrender. This is a very modern heroism. And honestly, I think we don't have the type of world, at least where I live right now, where I can be heroic like Hacksaw Ridge. You know, I could, but I don't know where to find it. Listen to police scanners to find out where there's 700 injured World War I vets. I don't know. All right, this one will be surprising, but this is in my top 10 movies. And it is, a lot of people see it as very trivial. Man on Fire, Denzel. This is a movie in which a retired military special ops operative named Creasy, played by Denzel Washington, is hired as a bodyguard by singer Mark Anthony for Mark Anthony and his wife Téa Leoni's daughter, played by none other than whatever her name is, Dakota Fanning. And Mickey Rourke is in it for 5 minutes, and Christopher Walken, it's one of his greatest roles of all time. For whatever reason, in almost every scene, they have Christopher Walken, no matter the stakes, he's like eating a beef sandwich. What are we going to do when Creasy comes and tells us that he doesn't want to fight no more? It's unbelievable. Beauty. Creasy is a drunk, and he basically tells Mark Anthony that he's like, look, I have a drinking problem. And Mark Anthony is like, well, then I guess I'll just like hire you as a bodyguard, but you know, I get like a discount because you're an alcoholic, which is this despicable. You know, I mean, to take a discount protection because they're very wealthy. And anyways, this is a movie where somebody finds purpose again, who thought they were beyond redemption. This is a very strong core value of mine, that nobody is beyond redemption. Nobody. And the darkest parts of this man, the reason why he drinks, suddenly become sacred rage. And now his shadow that he has hidden and tried to smother with alcohol, the wrong people have let it out of the basement, and this shadow is it's unstoppable. And it does not, like, it is a shadow that had to do things that no one else has, most other people don't even have to know about. And that blood on its hands, though, makes it like especially effective to make things right, is all I can say. Which is like a classic Denzel role, but I think this one is the absolute best. If you decide to watch Man on Fire, I want to just say one of the best things in that movie is how the subtitles come up, because they like sort of drop off the screen. Oh, that movie's so good. Tony Scott, rest in peace. Okay. Yeah, sacred rage, radical protection of the innocent at no stops. Guardian angel with blood on their hands would be a player identity. The heroism is like devastating oneself in the name of love and protection. And so what does this look like? Resource tracking, I don't know. Choices that require pain or sacrifice to protect. Flashback mechanics to remind you why you're acting the way you are or what you're doing. The last one is, now I know this is like anathema to the true movie freaks, and yes, I love the original by Stanislaw Lem, but I am the one person who also loves the 2002 version of Solaris with George Clooney. Another great soundtrack. And this is a movie about a man who is summoned to the Solaris space station that is parked outside of a distant planet that has extremely strange, anomalous behaviors. And the crew stopped responding, and so he is sent there to like assess them psychologically. And there is this line in that movie that I always think about, where George Clooney's character says, "This isn't moral." And the person across from him says, "Look around you. This situation is beyond morality." This is a movie that the key emotion is disorientation, reverence, submission to the unknowable, existential humility. What's the player identity? The quiet thinker who can't reason their way out, quietly or loudly, maybe. What is the heroism there? Stillness in the face of total cosmic ambiguity. So now, how do we reverse engineer this? How are we able to use this, right? Because this is tough. This is like, we're sort of converting, like, not decimals into fractions, but like decimals into soup. And so how do we do it? I don't have a perfect solution. And as I keep making this video, I don't know. Let me know if this is something that you would like to see in like if I put it together in like a 40, 50 page guide or something like that. I don't know if I could promise that, right? Yeah, just let me know. Who knows how I'll feel. Okay, so we want to now reverse engineer. And so here's what I think here's what I think the reverse engineering worksheet would look like. All right. So this is not a definitive system, but this is my attempt to bridge Northrop Frye's system to the mechanics of tabletop role-playing games. In a sense, it was kind of intuitive, and in another sense, it was like two different worlds. But I might not hit the nail on the head here, but I hope that I at least hit the board. So, step one would be to determine your desired narrative mode. And I think this is probably the easiest place to enter this, right? Because all of these other steps will have the knowledge or the choices made by previous steps here. But this is the one that I think most people would be comfortable answering just based on preference. And the question for narrative mode here is like, what scale do you want to play at? Do you want to play as a god or a demigod, right? Do you want to play as a superhero? Do you want to play as a king, a martyr, a tragic revolutionary leader? Do you want to play as Bill Clarkson? Or do you want to play as like Schlub McGee here? And there are reasons for all of these. And there are certainly stories that go between all of these. I will say that it is somewhat of a trope of modern storytelling that sometimes is fun and sometimes is overdone, which is having somebody from like one of these two right here suddenly entered into this frame right here. Now, I'm not talking about the hero's arc where you sort of descend into, Mount Doom. I'm thinking maybe more like Hitchhiker's Guide. Like, hey, human, come on board. You're the last human left. We have to build a highway and destroy Earth. Or maybe like a narrative frame that can be quite, I guess, tawdry, awkward would be like an, do you say isekai or lit RPG, which some people love that. The idea of just sort of stepping through a veil or a portal and being at a different level. But for the most part, I guess if you can't decide on one, which perhaps to start it would just be good to decide on one, at least, decide on a color of the spectrum here, right? So if it's going from like green, blue, yellow, orange, red, where do you want to be on that spectrum? Because this one right here, going from like ironic to mythic might be a bit disorienting, but who knows? I tend to start with a more simple approach and go from there. All right. So again, demigods, avatars, cosmic beings, superheroes, superheroes, fated warriors, kings, tragic leaders, people, survivors, skeptics, lovers, wanderers. All right. And then from there, we're going to go to step 2, which is we have our narrative mode. Now let's look at our predominant challenge type. And this is like an interstitial step that I am using in an attempt to stitch together the stuff that Frye is saying to actual discernible mechanics, right? Because this is, to re-clarify what I'm doing here, I'm trying to help you, or anybody, I'm trying to help you. Why won't you let me help? I'm trying to help people perhaps to actually like be able to follow this process without having some sort of deep understanding of this sort of literary theory or I think some people just don't feel like they are very creative. It's in my nature and many others to sort of disagree or push back on that, but I think some people, they need a formatted sort of workflow to start, and then they can riff on that. Okay. And so this is, I think, from Mythic, we can say like, what's the core challenge that somebody in a Mythic narrative mode would face? Well, I call this a cosmic challenge or a cosmic dilemma. All right, so this would have a character or characters saying, can I save the world? Can I save the universe? Can I rewrite reality? Can I stop this dimension from being folded in on itself? And should I? And then for romantic, I'm going to say fateful struggles. And for this, um, there's going to be, these individuals at odds with one another, and they will be individuals, but they may also represent, metaphorically, they may represent different philosophies or core values or even elements and stuff like that. Not to keep going on Marvel, but it's easy to reach to because it's just so like familiar and so ubiquitous. But it's like, if you look at Captain America, that's an easy one, right? Captain America is Steve Rogers, but he also represents, I guess, a version of the American way, or not cutting corners, or being forthright, or doing the right thing even when it's hard, and giving people something to believe in. And then you have like Tony Stark, on the other hand, represents the power of just pure intellect and resources and persistence and nonconformity, etc. And so that is what makes it a fateful struggle. And I guess the question here would be like, can I complete this quest to make things right or fulfill my vow? And I'd say there's probably a place where these two come into conflict. Some sort of demigod is super powerful, and you need a group of romantic heroes to take them on. And then high mimetic. I think the challenge type here is moral authority versus difficult or flawed. Let me actually think about the word I want to use here. All right, let's call it moral authority versus intuition or feelings, right? These are challenges that will often involve a negative force that is doing something that is clearly bad, collecting. I'm saying in the story, it's clearly bad, collecting taxes, rounding up people for, the 1980s vision of like, hey, what do you do with that mohawk? Get over here. You're going to prison, right? And it's like you have the moral authority of codified laws and rules and sort of civilizational effects versus this this using your own code, your intuition, your feelings as a moral compass. And a lot of times I think these challenges are about moving through a time of change. Can I hold my values even if my values do not conform with the codified values? Am I brave enough to believe that I am right even when every person who holds power and everyone who acquiesces to them would say I'm wrong? Low mimetic, I think here we're talking about survival, connection, safety. A lot of times, this is a story about somebody. I think John McClane is a good example of this, but I think the best low mimetic stories are the ones in which the person's goal is quite narrow, or quite it could be even sort of silly. In Die Hard, there is this in, I think it was Die Hard 3, Die Hard with a Vengeance. There is this subplot. I don't know if it's strong enough for a subplot, but it's a recurrent bit where John McClane keeps trying to find aspirin, and because he's got just the worst headache, and he throughout the whole movie, does anyone have aspirin? Can I have some aspirin? How does nobody have aspirin? Oh, I have Tylenol. No, I don't want Tylenol. Do you have aspirin? And then finally, at the end, he is chained up to like barrels of explosives, and the bad guy is like, "You've been caught, McClane, and this is your own doing. Now, I'll be on the shore, but I'll be sure to watch for you when you explode." And then McClane's like, "Do you have any aspirin?" He's like, "Oh, yeah, actually, you're in luck." And he throws him a thing of aspirin. Um, and I think that those are the sorts of um, ways that the everyman can connect with that character. Maybe I don't know what it's like to be uh, chained around explosive barrels, but I certainly know what it's like to have a headache. And it also is very informative about like the meta theme of that story, which is like, this is a guy who doesn't want to get involved, and he just keeps these headaches keep happening, right? That they keep happening. And if you're familiar with Warhammer, and I won't get carried away with this, but one of the best forms, I think, of this is Caiaphas Cain, Hero of the Imperium, which this is, there's a couple funny series in Warhammer, like anything with the orcs or the Red Gobbo, Mechanicus can be funny. But this one is like fun, easy reading because basically Caiaphas Cain is a commissar. A commissar's job is to execute anybody who any soldier in the Imperial Guard who tries to abandon their post, instead of like trying to get, their billions of soldiers to acquiesce. They're like, well, you're going to go to the line and you're going to pick up your las gun and you're going to fire it. And if you don't, the commissar behind you is going to kill you. Right? So you can either die in battle or die back here. And so it's a brutal, grim position. And Caiaphas Cain really just wants to like have whiskey and put his feet up and at all cost avoid trouble. But what's many fun stories worth is him constantly just being in the wrong place or the right place, depending on how you look at it, and in wanting to just get out of the situation, he does these things that are often either misinterpreted or he's just seen at just the right moment where he's, someone flips him over their head and he's about to land on his neck and die, and he just puts his sword out and it drills through a huge orc, and somebody's like, "Oh my gosh, did you see Caiaphas Cain just did a backflip?" And and he's also got a very smelly companion named Jurgen, who is a psychic blank, meaning he has no soul. And we'll talk about Warhammer some other time. Anyways, I think here is it has to be safety and survival. That is what compels this character. It doesn't have to be, but it's very often. And then it's also connection. This idea of like, well, I can't do this on my own, but somehow if we stitch several people together, something incredible can happen. And I think these stories are good reminders of that. We often say that we're not capable of things, and then one day, we finally ask for help, and we find that it's just that's all we needed was just a little help from our friends. And then ironic, the challenge type here, I would say, is like absurd challenge, or perhaps disillusionment, like a Brazil scenario where you are subjected to the idiocy of bureaucracy, or it demonstrates how a system is unfair, resignation. But there is one that does vex this model here. And interestingly, I had a long conversation one night, one of the most fascinating conversations with friends who are from Europe. A few of them from the UK, a few of them from not Amsterdam, Holland, and well, I guess one of them. Anyways, we got into this thing of what is something that you just do not understand about Americans, and I don't think this is as salient of a cultural thing anymore, but this was like 15 years ago, and they were like, we just do not understand why you guys love the movie Forrest Gump. And it's true. I love that movie. And it is just this guy who is not very bright, and just by his good nature and accidents just keeps stumbling into these central, prominent place in a lot of historical events. And so I don't know. It often. I mean, that could be a form of absurdity, nihilism, resignation, and I guess it could also be a story of like dumb luck and lack of control. Just about how we really don't. We really think the things that we have the formula for, effort plus persistence equals success. Sometimes, and sometimes it's like just you click on the right thing in the right moment. All right, so now it's still a bit vague in terms of how we convert this into a game. All right, and I think this is where I would definitely, well, number one, love some feedback. I think if anyone has more ideas on this, but this is where I'm starting to think what sorts of stories and what sorts of games would make sense here. And here's what I came up with so far. So for Mythic and Cosmic Dilemma, this is called gameplay or mechanical structures. Let's say for Cosmic Dilemma, this could be, you know what? I'm going to take a minute and write these out so I can not take up too much of your time. Took way longer on this than I should have, but what we're looking to do now is we have the narrative mode, which tells us the scale and in some ways the type of the story, and then we have the core struggle or the core conflict, and even in uplifting sort of games, there has to be a conflict. I suppose that there are some games that don't invoke overt conflict. But even I was playing some game on Nintendo DS where you had to mix up potions. And the challenge was that the customers from the town were going to be there at 7 a.m. and they needed potions. So, it's not a challenge where the fate of the world hangs in the balance, but it's a conflict that initiates plot. And so we have this struggle that comes along with it. For instance, in Mythic narrative mode, we might have a cosmic burden or symbolic archetypical consequence. And so what we're trying to do now is to extract a structure and mechanics that will evoke whatever the mode and struggle is. Okay, because just to refocus us here, what we're trying to do is sort of figure out how to systematically determine the type of experience we want to have. And so if we're certain that we want to play something at the mythic level, that one's kind of tough, right? I mean, in terms of tabletop role-playing games, I have a harder time thinking of that. 4X games, I think, do that, like Civilization, or there was a really cool game for Super Nintendo called ActRaiser, where you were like a messenger of God, and you had to keep the people happy on Earth, etc. There are certainly other games that have the cosmic burden. I think when you're working in the framework of mythological figures, there was a rash of like mythology movies in the early 2010s, sort of Perseus, Theseus kind of stuff. Uh, and so the gameplay structure that I propose here, this is not the one answer, but if we're trying to have function follow form, we want there to be some sort of loop. And in things of this scale, the way that humans usually have cosmic uh, circumstances communicated to them is through some sort of augury, a prophecy. And this even includes in like Cthulhu, right? There's usually, like Lovecraftian works, both eldritch works, these sort of cosmic horror. It's maybe perhaps not a prophecy, but there's some sort of cryptic message that comes through or that certain people are aware of, and it's in a very small way something that is beyond our comprehension is attempting to communicate with humans. And so the gameplay structure of a myth cycle loop where you have a prophecy, then an ordeal, then a transformation, and a transcendence. That would be an example of like a structure that on that level might work. Now, I do want to say because, and I'm not a stickler about this, but I do think that sometimes these are used interchangeably, and uh, I am being pretty intentional in the way that I use structure and mechanics and the differences between them. So for me, and this is not just for me, I think this is definitionally, gameplay mechanics are the core rules and systems. They are the levers, the switches, the wheels. They are the things you interact with or the ways in for you to interact with the system. So this would be a gameplay mechanic, right? These buttons. This is a way that you get the game to move. Move, game, do your thing. And of course, in tabletop, very often this is a way that we get things to happen, dice rolling, but also clocks, depleting clocks, resource depletion, um, skill checks, saves, tags, like using tags to sort of concept map different scenarios, stats, HP, XP, MP, deck building, push your luck, journaling prompts. This is ways in. It is the way that we interface with these games. And gameplay mechanics are, without them, we're just observing. Okay, and so those are the things that allow us to toggle, right? They're the way in. Gameplay structures they're the overall frameworks of play. So you might say that structures are the way that the mechanics are arranged or used or invoked, and often simply because of convenience and coherency. This is often to the point of, I would say, almost always arranged in some sort of cycle or pattern, at least a pattern. If not like a cycle, then at least, this, then this, then this, and less here, then this, then this, and this. And so the most common loop in a game is not always even explicitly named, which is like a campaign loop. Right? But even if you look at a very simple video game RPG, Final Fantasy, when a game is good and going well, you don't notice this loop. And this loop looks like this. Explore until you find something that gives you purpose, right? So usually it's an NPC who will say, I have this mission for you, or I have this problem that needs solving, or I need your help, or I am warning you, or whatever it is. It catalyzes action that often involves acquiring something. You can acquire an object, a weapon that will make you stronger to face something. You'll maybe a person, right? The beautiful prince has gone missing. I'd rather sing for that. Whatever it is, there, or it could be information, it could be a clue, it could be a memory, it could be, you're acquiring it, you're bringing it back, and this is upgrading you in some way. It is giving you new information, new access, new abilities, new standing in the community. And then with that, you go and you explore again until you find purpose. That's a campaign loop. In games that are great, you don't notice it. In games that are repetitive, you notice it. And so sometimes you'll have in a game a gameplay loop that is just a circle, plain as can be, but the setting is amazing and the NPCs are amazing and the weapons and tools and armor and all this stuff, it's all incredible. And so you don't really care. But when there's something there that is missing, we become more aware of this loop. And this is when games can start to feel like, okay, I kind of get it. And if you been following the channel for a while, it was a few months ago, I got on this like mega dungeon kick. And I said, oh man, this is what I want to do. I want to find big mega dungeon books. And good thing I chose that as my temporary hobby, because those all cost about $150. And I was like, yeah, how cool is this? You get this big dungeon and I can spend all my time exploring and finding things. Well, I don't want to take anything away from those 400-page books, but just as a matter of course, like humans, if you have to write 400 pages of dungeon, which is maybe 3 or 4 encounters or rooms on a spread, after a while, you're going to run out of new ideas. Maybe the carpet is red instead of blue. Maybe the lantern's on the left instead of the right. And I started to really notice the cycle of it and be like, oh, okay, well, I get it. Okay. Narrative branching, if you've heard of like hub and spoke, nodes, is it open world? Can you move? Do you have freedom to go in certain directions, or do you have freedom to go anywhere, or do you have freedom for a starting point, but that's it? Famous example of that sort of branching would be if you played Mega Man, and that is a game where like you can start and you have 8 bosses and 8 worlds, Lava Man, Crush Man, and you can pick any of them you want, but you have to start at the beginning of their level. And so different games have different levels of that. Video games, obviously, role-playing games, right? You could start with a funnel. You could start with a sort of like very direct opening scene that serves as sort of a tutorial, or you could have a game that's just like, okay, you wake up. So mechanics for this, because we're dealing on this symbolic cosmic level, we might consider using symbolism, oracle, tarot, draws. We might consider the meta theme of sacrifices. We might make it a game that involves sacrificing power and trading that off. Making deals with the devil, making submitting to a higher power, and then giving that power a like choosing what sort of well, let me show you what I'm thinking of. So this was a video I recorded earlier this week, and if you didn't check this out, this was such a fun actual play. It's incredible, and I also used Alrathok, which is like the high seas one, but this very simple character generation in Kalarath, you start, and if for magic, you have to choose like a pact pact of blood or a pact of destruction, domination, illumination, shadow. There's some other ones in further sequels and stuff, but each of these pacts has a different set of spells. It also has different agreements you have to make, right? And so some general ones, like these are called dooms. And I really like this system where you have to take on various taboos or observances. You know, it's like what is the pact of domination? What is their version of you can't eat meat on Friday in Lent? Well, at the behest of his demon, the caster must travel to a desolate place of powerful significance to his master and spend D6 days and nights there in prayer and meditation. Okay. And so these sorts of things, we might not be able to access those kind of things if we're playing a street level game. Okay, so other ones that we might consider are like if you've ever played Hades, and I know I'm using video games, I just think it's more general reference sometimes, but Hades, the game Hades, you will have different boons and banes. You know, that's something that works well mechanically for the game, but also is relevant to the idea, the mythological status of the game, both in form and function. Okay. What else? Rituals, using ritual, having observances. Symbolism, having symbolism and sigils be the sources of power. Okay. For romantic level, the core struggle is this heroism through costly choices. And so this one might be more of a quest arc, right? Think of a game where, like Diablo 4, I just booted up again the other night and was like, come on, I've got to like this. Diablo 1 and 2 were like some of my favorite games in history, but there's just something in Diablo 4. I don't know what it is, but that's a great example. Or Fallout, a great example of a game where you're going around and you're choosing which quests to honor because those are going to shape who your character is, what their priorities are, and how people see them. All right, so that would be like the structure of it, because at this level, we're looking for the call to action, facing the challenge, reaching that narrative climax, and then having a sort of transformation. Because in this place of where the romantic mythical structure is, this is person who really needs power, right? They really need to, you know, gather up the power that is needed in order to face like what they need to face. A difficult thing that is always dealt with Superman or any other commensurate ultimate superhero is like, how do you put this person in a difficult situation? And if you look into the history of Superman, it has led like writers throughout its history into these existential crises of, you know, how do you make it so that Superman has any trouble doing anything? I think also with this, there is, even though I don't think Ironsworn and Starforged are on this level, I would say it's probably high mimetic. A vow system, right? Because if we look at any mythological pantheon, it is usually these exceptional humans that the gods are most interested in terms of giving their submitting to them, worshiping them, doing these things in their name, because it's almost a strange form of like deity based pickup artistry, right? Like Zeus will show up and be like, you know, I could help you the most. I got like lightning bolts and stuff to give you. For high mimetic, you know, the core struggle might be moral compromise, tragic weight, persistence, and so This could be a spiral of consequence. You make a decision, you face a public or private loss, you might go left at a certain place in the pathway, and then you can't go right ever again, right? So you like lose out on this and dealing with the weight of those consequences. You're an exceptional human. You're at your peak of human or whatever, elven form, but you are mortal. And so what needs to be front and center is the sort of choices that you make as time marches on. And that time only goes in one direction. Mechanically, forked event trees, builds, like skill trees that you can make certain decisions of like, well, I'm really going to focus on ranged attacks and let's just hope that I don't get pulled in close and grappled. One of the most widely useful techniques in all of role-playing games. Loyalty systems, maybe for just the party or maybe something wider. Strongholds, corralling the allegiance and getting people to align with your vision. I'm not quite sure how to articulate this, but I did write down like public and private differences in stat. So maybe like the way that you are seen by others differs from the way that you know yourself to be. So maybe a limiting of information about yourself because of that different way that you're going to be seen by the public at large. I think of the Astartes in Warhammer, they're all like 9 feet tall. People see them as angels. And they are still, yes, they can live 600 years or more, but like they could technically live forever, but usually they get blown apart. To humans, these are angels, literal angels, but they are still made from humans, right? And so there has to be some sort of difference or breach of understanding of what you're capable of. Otherwise, if you know yourself to be the same as what the humans think you are, well, then you're not really a heroic character or an exceptional human. You are like a demigod or a god. Low mimetic, survival, connection, resilience under pressure. A daily cycle would be some structure: gathering, interacting, losing stuff, adapting, making the scheduled things on time. And the mechanics could be resource attrition, creating bonds or attachment tracks, using the environment, small cost tactical choices that have like cumulative stakes over time. And then ironic, we could talk about that some other time. I was trying the idea of an entropy loop. But the final piece of this, and I wanted to put it all in one row, but the limits of 8.5 by 11 paper. The final piece is you have to choose your preferred suffering. And the essential question with that is like, what kind of suffering will make your story meaningful? And so my initial options I wrote were, I want to protect others, but lose a little myself each time. Spawn, perfect example of that from Image Comics, is like, he has these amazing powers, but his soul is literally depleted a little bit when he uses them. I want to be someone who sees the end coming but keeps going because there's nothing else to do except keep going. I want to live in a world that doesn't reward virtue and still be virtuous. These are obviously like ones that I've articulated as being important to me. I want to feel the burden, a mythic level burden. I want to know the loneliness of being a god. That one is not, I don't see myself as a lonely god, although sometimes when I'm recording these videos, I wish someone was here to chat with me. Or I want to flail and fail and laugh through the futility of it all. That would be maybe an ironic setting. But I realize that even though I don't see these things as incompatible with fun, happy, even cozy games, I think just referring to it only as suffering might be confusing for some people. But for me, it's really identifying what sort of misery your character is trying to avoid or trying to overcome. Um, that is critical. That's the final piece of determining your experience. It's where you put all these other things together and you say, this is who I am. This is what's difficult for me. This is how my game is going to go. Given all of that, what is the thing that I am like running from or toward during this game? But I did divide them up into like, I made some uh, positive ones, I guess you could say, like hopeful challenges. So, creative challenge. You might want to discover, build, or express, I think, smoothing. Express smoothing. I assume I meant something. Relational challenges. Navigate bonds, trust, develop, heighten, deepen relationships with people. Resilience. Endure, um, not because you're not wounded, but because you're committed, right? Exploration, venturing into the unknown, joyful mastery, getting better at something that it makes is satisfying, like a farming simulator. Restoration, heal something, place, a bond, a memory. And then these other duties, I have burden duty, moral compromise, isolation, regret, atonement, slow loss, unwelcome transformation. So all of these things are the key to them, and the question you have to be asking yourself the whole time is, does this sound like the type of thing that is going to feel important to me? Because we don't want to lose sight of the big picture. Even if I were to write like a guide to this, and I feel like I should, because I just, unfortunately, I don't feel like I stuck the landing in this video in the way that I wanted to. I think it's a little undercooked still, but I think that you cannot be subservient to this process if this process leads you to some place that doesn't seem like it'll be emotionally satisfying for you. You have to almost be selfish and say, I would like to engineer an experience that is just for me. So I want to pop in really quick before the end of the video, which is coming up soon, and it stinks. Wait till you see it. I'm like, well, I guess that's it. But what's kind of funny and ironic is that I'm right now talking about like keeping your eyes on the big picture of things, and don't lose sight of like doing what your original motivation for something is. And here I am losing sight of one of the main things, motivations for making this video. And so really quick, I just want to say that the genesis of this video is in response to a certain type of comment that I get. And this comment, I don't want to exaggerate. It does not like frustrate me at all. It does not depress me. I mean, that those are both overreaches, and in the case of frustrating me, that's just wrong. But the comment is something along the lines of like, hey, I played last night and I don't get it. I must have done something wrong because I don't, like, nothing happened. And I totally understand that. And I totally want to like encourage you to keep playing or to reevaluate it. But it's one of those things where, again, there are so many different hobbies in this world that like we have so little time. If one doesn't work that well for us, it's hard to give it another chance. I think about Xbox Game Pass, how I used to get so excited that no matter what game I brought home from the store when I was a kid, I would play the hell out of it, even if it sucked. But now it's like I have a million games at my fingertips and they're all free with the subscription. And so if I play for 10 minutes and I don't like it, I'm like, well, I could keep at it here, but why? There's all these other options. And so it's just sad because, it's a person who very much could have enjoyed this hobby and gotten a lot out of it. They just kind of don't have the bandwidth for it. And I totally get it. And it's one of those things where, I can take you to the water park. I can help you even walk up the ladder, but I can't jump into the pool for you, right? Um, and and what I want to say about this is that if you are having a hard time actually sitting down and playing, this is one of the most common things. Is like I just can't do it. There's something that either I'm not able to dedicate time, or I exhaust myself with character setup, or I am addicted to like collecting the books and I never play them. Um, and what I want to say about that is, um, are you even able to articulate what you think you are going to enjoy about this hobby? Right. And yes, I understand that some people are drawn to things for reasons cosmic in nature, right? Like you don't know why you're interested. You just feel like you want to do it, right? I get it. But for almost every event that is known, you would probably be able to predict what the sort of sweetness is that you're looking for. Like if I were to say, "Hey, have you ever gone fishing?" and you said no, and I said, "You want to go fishing?" and I wasn't like your boss or anything that was applying any sort of duress or pressure on you, and you were able to honestly ask yourself, "Do I want to go fishing?" In order to say yes, there would have to be some aspect of the experience that made you feel as though you were going to get something that you like out of the experience, that you were going to experience something that you like. And it's usually a very vague sort of thing. Like with fishing, it's a good example. Um, Even if I don't haven't gone fishing before, I would say, well, I'll probably like fishing because I like any hobbies in which you patiently allow something to develop and then suddenly it's time and you have to react right away, which, by the way, that is not me at all, but I can't stand fishing. But or you'll say like, oh, I love like anything that requires a level of preparation and learning a new skill, or I love something that requires accuracy or timing. Whatever it is, that may or may not be the thing that you end up liking about fishing, or you might not end up liking fishing. But if you can't even say any part of the fishing experience that you would even like, you really need to have that conversation with yourself before you beat yourself up about not being able to sit down and play a solo game, because uh, you're never going to find the motivation amidst all your other responsibilities. You're never going to find the motivation to do something that you don't even know how it could be enjoyable. So I'm not saying to like wrangle your solo session into exactly what you want. Like the thing that you want to happen might not happen if you play earnestly and allow, the story to write itself. But you should have things that you at least look forward to, that you at least know that if they do happen, you'll get a thrill out of it. Because otherwise, how in the hell are you going to motivate yourself? It seems like you are trying to motivate yourself for something that you don't even know what it does or what it could do or what you will feel, because we're all adults, right? Like, to say I solo played and nothing happened. Well, what did you think was going to happen? Did you think your chakra, like crown chakra, was going to open and a flock of doves was going to blast out of your trepanned head? Like, it's a role playing game. You're going to play it and take notes and roll some dice and have some uncertainty and have some decision making and have some cool storytelling and interpersonal interactions. And then cumulatively at the end of that, you'll be able to sort of cognitively appraise that experience and look back and say, oh, I like that part. That was fun. I'd like to do more of that. But if you can't even say what you might like, I think you need to take some time to consider that before you jump in. All right. Wait till you see the end of this video. It stinks. 2 hours. And I'm like, yeah, so that's cool. These are these things that as a child we would, you know, be satisfied to just daydream about them. Those represent something at a very fundamental level about like what moves us, what compels us, and if you remember, I said all the way back at the beginning of the video, which was long ago. I literally went to work halfway through this video, by the way. Like I went and did an 8-hour shift. But remember that the most important thing here is honesty. If you are not keeping score for real, and instead you're like, well, I want to have this sort of experience. You know, I want to like what are the games that like I always download if they're on Game Pass or something, and I'm like, come on, this game is perfect. Like a Crusader Kings game or something. Like any sort of game that involves having a lineage of monarchs or whatever, and developing your kingdom through time, and it's not 45 minutes in, then I'm like, I just don't like this. I'm just not engaged right now. So you have to have highly honest conversations. How big do you want this story to be? What's the struggle? What's the structure? What's the mechanics? What type of suffering do you fancy? You put all those together, you could determine a lot, because we have a lot of resources at our fingertips. We have OSR games. We have setting only. We have Mythic. We have other systems. We have cards that we can use as oracles. We have whole setting books and rule guides and all kinds of stuff. And so think of it as a buffet of abundance. And this will also help you to narrow down what you actually want to purchase, right? Because otherwise you're just sort of like stabbing in the dark, hoping, boy, I hope this is the game I like. It's a big investment for that kind of thing. You know, it's not a phone game for $1.99. So I hope some of that made sense. Again, let me know in the comments if you'd like to you think this could be developed a little more. I have some more ideas for it, but yeah, I want to see if people are picking up what I'm putting down. That's yeah. I think that'll do it. But I can't find the. Oh, here it is. The Ides of July cometh. I'll be updating this list on the 15th. All right, so don't get mad. It's a big list. There's lots of you very happy about that, but it's a big. Oh, bye.